No, no, sir, I have not. I apologize.
You want us to tell you our names so we can call the roll?
No, ma'am, I'll have it. Bear with me one moment. Commissioner Burks? Present. Commissioner Dawson? Present. Commissioner Lucas? Present. Vice Mayor Rainey?
Present.
Mayor Blade?
Present.
We have a quorum, Mr. Mayor.
Good evening and welcome to the Fairview Board of Commissioners meeting. Tonight is August the 1st, 2019 at 7 p.m. The third item on the agenda is the prayer and pledge. If you'll please stand. Our most kind and gracious Heavenly Father, we thank you for this day and for all the many blessings you've given us. We gather to make decisions for our community. May we use only our best skills and judgment, keeping ourselves impartial and neutral as we consider the merits and pitfalls of each matter that is placed before us, and always act in accordance with what is best for our community and our fellow citizens. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
Amen. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
The fourth item on the agenda is approval of agenda and executive session announcements. We will have an executive session at the end of this meeting.
Motion to approve.
Second.
First by Commissioner Burks, second by Vice Mayor Rainey. Any discussion? Hearing none, Mr. Collins, roll call vote.
Commissioner Burks?
Aye.
Vice Mayor Rainey?
Aye.
Commissioner Lucas?
Aye.
Commissioner Dawson?
Aye.
Mayor Blade?
Aye.
Motion carries, Mayor.
Item 5, public hearings. We have none this evening. Item 6, citizens' comments. None this evening. Item 8, staff comment, item 7, public announcements, awards, and recognitions. We have none this evening. Item 8, staff comments and monthly reports. A, police report. Chief Humphreys. Welcome, sir.
Good afternoon. Start off our July report. Just as last month, we've had no change in staffing, fortunately, 21. You'll see a significant drop in overtime hours from 131 to 18. And then our training hours from 160 down to 96. And again, that is sort of due to a lot of vacations and stuff like that. Getting a lot of guys off, we toned down that training for that month. Our operational report in monthly comparison, calls and self-initiated, up just a little bit from 838 to 854. Go ahead, Keith. Our arrest totals, about mirrored, 95 to 96. Domestics, about 4 to 3. DUIs went up from 1 to 3. Our drug charges back up a little bit. That's usually always from self-initiated stuff, stops like that, simple possession off stops. And our thefts, ironically, doubled for the month. A lot of that was shoplifting. That was not home invasion type stuff. The majority of that was shoplifting things. The citations, about consistent there, 34 to 27, not too much difference. Traffic accidents were 20, down just a little bit. Property damage was 17, and fortunately 3 with injury, but no fatalities. Public relations event, we had the July 3rd event, you guys know, and that for us, that is our big fundraiser for Shop with a Cop. We were able to raise $2,293 total, $1,169 of our food tent, and $1,124 out of our silent auction. And that's it, nothing additional. Any questions?
Mayor, I've got a question
Yes,
for the
sir.
police chief.
Yes,
So
sir.
how's everything going with the new law that was enacted with cell phones, and what are you seeing? The citations seem to be down.
The citations are down, largely, again, that has to do with when you hit the summer months, you'll get a lot of guys trying to burn that, some of their vacation time, take those vacations. So your staffing's down and you're there generally doing a lot of reactive type stuff, answering calls more so than proactive because you don't have the additional staffing. We agreed, as I told you, when I announced in one of the previous meetings that law was going into effect, that we were going to try to be proactive in making those stops for the benefit of the community, but sort of warning them at first, giving them some time to acclimate themselves to that being the law, and then moving into the citation phase. As we move into August, you'll probably see that number go up because we've spent some time there making those just verbal warnings on the side of the road and not actually citing people, trying to get that message out to them, giving them a chance to get that, because that is tough. That is a tough thing if you're so used to doing that, to pick that phone up and call, and a lot of people do it out of habit, and so we're just trying to get that message across, but you're going to see those citations increase because we are going to start to enforce that.
Have you seen a decrease in utilization just
No,
already?
not yet,
or-
not really.
Oh, you haven't? Okay.
Not really. I mean, we
So
still.
just as a reminder.
As I travel, through the city, you still see people on them, and they're just,
Okay.
like I said, it's habit right now.
Great, thank you, Chief.
Okay. Anything else?
Thank you, Chief.
All right.
One
Oh, Mr.
question
Collins.
regarding that, just to make sure, and I think the chief would echo this. On the reduction in the overtime, there's reduction in the overtime hours that we paid, but our officers are still putting in that time. You may recall that we changed our timekeeping process to be in compliance with the Fair Labor Standards Act. So our officers are still putting in that time, doing that work, just the compensable overtime hours has changed. Their hourly rate has been adjusted. So I didn't want to give the impression that the number of hours weren't being worked. They're still pretty tasked pretty heavily. It's just the compensation of those hours has changed and reduced that overtime cost.
Yes, absolutely. The majority of my officers would fall between, in the overtime hours, that 1 to 12-hour overtime range, giving a court day that comes up or something like that, they have to work court. No one was really exceeding 17, 18, 20 hours. So as we made that adjustment in the Fair Labor Standards Act to be compliant with fire 28-day cycle and from going from a 160 to a 172, that really takes care of a majority of that. They're still working over and they're compensated for it, but it's not compensated at the overtime. It's their base pay compensation now, which drastically reduced that overtime there you see.
Mayor, I have a question.
Yes, ma'am.
Chief, I know there's been lots of talk, and you and I exchanged emails this weekend. Can you tell us the subscription cost of the alert system?
The Nixle,
Yes.
I'm not for certain. They do that by either by population or by police department size. We had looked into it last year, and it's a couple $1,000s. We have entertained that idea several times. It's still not off the table. As I move back to that, the problem is who do you get to enter that information? If you just leave it to supervisors, the sergeants, well, when they're gone, who enters that information to get that information out to the public immediately? So when we address that challenge and figure out how internally we want to fix that issue for us, then we're probably going to move forward with that being a Nixle alert system. We hope to, as we move into the new webpage, have that as a link to that so people could sign up to that through that webpage.
Okay, thank you, sir.
Anything else?
Thank you, Chief. Item 8B, the fire report, Chief Hughes. Welcome, sir.
Mayor, Commissioners. For the month of July, we had 92 emergency calls, down a little bit from last year, same time frame in July. In those calls, we had 9 overlapping incidents for the month, 2 automatic mutual aid to surrounding departments. One was a water evacuation that ended up not being. We were called out to help during that flash flooding around the 4th of July. We were called out to help them with one of those calls. Another was a medical call that we were asked to take for one of the surrounding departments. We also participated in the July 3rd celebration, and we had 2 new additions to the fire family this month. Firefighter Mike O'Leary on your left, and his wife had their first daughter, first child for him, Harper O'Leary, and then on the right, Sean Grandel was firefighter on A shift. Him and his wife, that's their second daughter, Olivia. So everybody's doing fine. Sean's back to work. Mike's gonna take a little more time off. That's his first child. So we'll welcome him back on later this month. The breakdown on the calls, again, medical calls lead the way with 69% of our calls. We had 2 fire calls, and then 8 motor vehicle accidents, no fatalities, and others make up fire alarms, canceled calls, calls for service. July training, we had 523 hours of training, just made up of our normal medical training, our online HR training and fire training, officer training. We had several pub ed opportunities this month. We visited with about 75 kids total. That was between the elementary school summer programs, Camp Marymount and their campers, and then we had several station visits. Want to also remind the public, if you know of anybody or if you need smoke detectors, call the fire department, set up a time, we'll come out and install them for you. Again, we have that off of a state grant, and we have basically an unlimited supply. So I'd also like to remind everybody school starts back next week. Be careful of the school zone, pay attention, slow her down. People are going to be walking to school, so watch. Questions?
Thank you, Chief.
Thank you.
Item 8C, excuse me, 8C, Public Works Report. Mr. Collins.
Yes, Mayor, members of the commission, a couple of items for you tonight. First, as a reminder, although it's not Public Works, we are in the process of beginning the revision of our city's website. I have my first meeting on that tomorrow as far as the planning stage of that, what will include, how we'll move forward with that. We anticipate that entire project is going to take 90 days, 90 to 120, likely closer to 90. As you move forward over the next couple of weeks, if there are sooner, the next week, 10 days, if there are things that you would specifically like to see on a website or have the website do, if you can email those to me. We're now at the infancy stage where we can start including some of those things as we go forward. Once we get the framework of the website built out, we will push that out to each of you so you can see the process as we go forward and see how it's going to look, how it's going to work, and all those things. It will not go live until it's complete. When it is complete, there will be a total changeover on one day, where the city's website will be one thing 1 minute and the new website the next. Within that, we'll need to get feedback from you guys. Email is easiest, so I can forward that information on to the designers and make sure we don't miss anything in that process.
And after you've said that, can I ask a question?
Yes.
Can we have one tab that is just going to be about playground development, so that there's one source?
it is-
So that
it-
everyone can go there and get information?
It is already included on
Oh,
there.
good, thank you.
We put a framework on there for that, and yes, it is included on that thing. And it will include fundraising efforts, that sort of thing, the whole progress for that, for the playground going forward.
But just general information also?
Absolutely.
Okay.
And then outside of that, there's been some discussion. I was asked to make or provide some information regarding the Christmas wreaths as they've been discussed since I've been here for 3 years. The Christmas wreaths have become a question, kind of faded out, and that's become a question again. I just want to let everyone know where we are within that process and explain to each of you the information I have as I know it. It's my understanding that the Christmas wreaths were provided to the city through a donation, a community effort, roughly 5 years ago. Those wreaths were donated. I don't think that was a request of the city. I think that was a smaller community effort, and those things were brought to the city as a part of that effort. I have brought to the city council meeting tonight one example of each of the two sizes of wreaths that we have. Obviously, the larger size to the left and the smaller size to the right. A couple of questions have been brought about why those cannot be installed and what's the next step or steps as we go forward. There are several reasons for them not to be installed. First is concern by Middle Tennessee Electric regarding the weight of the Christmas wreaths themselves. I would encourage anyone to walk over, pick up either of those two wreaths and determine how's the best way to install that 30 feet high on a utility pole. It's a near impossibility. So the simple installation of the poles is a problem. Specific to the poles themselves is the weight loading capacity of the wreaths. Those wreaths are not plastic wreaths. Those wreaths are made of steel rebar and reinforced with steel rebar, and they have substantial weight to them. The issue you run into when you get into the weight loading is not only the weight of the wreaths themselves, but the weight that is created by wind, rain, storm, ice, frost, those sorts of things that multiply the weight and the weight loading of those wreaths. The other component is the installation of them themselves. If you look along Highway 100, along the primary corridor, and you look at the utility poles, there are multiple levels of multiple phases of electric wiring that runs along those transmission lines. There's no clean location to get on a bucket truck and install those wreaths. Other component that you have is it takes a minimum of 2 employees to be in a bucket truck to install those wreaths. Our bucket truck is for one person, and it's not insulated. So the sheer safety of installing these wreaths on those street light poles is just an impossibility from a safety standpoint. It's just not built for the function of that. My suggestion would be to move forward with some sort of purchase of a commercially available plastic-type material that does not conduct electricity, that comes with its own mounting brackets, and is an easier installation that we could potentially put on Highway 100. I would also encourage us to consider, rather than attempting to install those on 100, to do those on City Center Drive and City Center Way with the city utility poles we have on the gateway. Those poles are not currently constructed or wired to bear the weight of the wreaths that we currently have. If we go to a commercial grade or commercially made lightweight plastic, then we can wire those poles for plug-in to have power to them and install a bracket suitable to hold those up in any kinds of weather. The short answer for the wreaths we have is we just don't have the physical capability to install them on the poles. We don't have the safety characteristics to install them on the poles or to maintain them in such that way. Beyond that, I'd be glad to answer any questions that I can regarding that, but that's the most comprehensive answer I can give you regarding the lack of installation of the wreaths that we have on those poles.
There has been some questions that could business owners, if they wanted to, have those to use at their local businesses?
I would encourage anyone who has any interest in ownership of one of these wreaths to let us know, and we will gladly make them available. We have 35 of each size. So if there's someone who desires to have one of those, if they'll contact City Hall, we'll make arrangements so that person come and inspect them and make sure it's something they want to have. But yes, ma'am, we would encourage that if at all possible.
Okay, thank you.
You know, I'm all about Christmas, and I'd love to have wreaths up and down the road. I think it's beautiful for a city, and I think it adds charm to the city. I think it's what brings community together. Christmas, I love the thought, and I hope we can work towards a solution eventually. Obviously, this year it's not in the budget for us to do that. Is that correct?
But there is some money available in this year's budget for those similar type decorations. So I believe the total line item budget's $10,000.
Okay. So we'll look into possibly purchasing or acquiring the plastic,
As it get closer to season, we'll
Okay.
get some cost or some prices, get that information
Okay.
back out to the BOC, maybe get an example or two, let you see what those are, and then if you want to
Okay.
move forward, we'll make arrangements
Alright.
to move forward.
But on the flip side of that, it has to be done safe. If we don't have the equipment, my understanding at one point, we even asked the fire department to take them down. We cannot jeopardize the safety of our city employees in putting those wreaths up. I mean, if it's not. And did we actually get something from the department saying that those will not?
There was an email communication that was transmitted back and forth in the fall of 2016.
Okay.
My first year here. We have since upgraded our email system. I'll have to go back and do a manual search of multiple computers to find that thing.
Okay.
But within that, I have seen the email, I read the email, and it was quite specific that the infrastructure currently available on Highway 100 is just not capable of supporting
Okay.
the items that we have today.
All right. Bottom line, those are not our poles.
Yes, sir, that's
right?
correct.
I mean, so, okay.
So did I understand you correctly that we have $10,000 budgeted for that?
There's a line item in the budget that is under community events for $10,000 that could be used for that. That's correct.
Any other discussion?
Thank you.
Questions? Thank you, Mr. Collins.
Yes, sir.
Item 9, consent agenda.
Motion to approve.
Second.
Motion by Vice Mayor Rainey, second by Commissioner Lucas. Is there any discussion? Roll call vote, Mr. Johnson, Mr. Collins?
Vice Mayor Rainey,
Aye.
Commissioner Burks,
Aye.
Commissioner Dawson,
Aye.
Commissioner Lucas,
Aye.
Mayor Blade.
Aye.
Motion carries. Thank you.
Item 10, old business, we have none. Item 11, new business A, ordinance 2019-17. Mr. Collins.
Yes, Mayor, members of the commission, this is, you don't have to take action on this tonight. There is an ordinance that will be coming, but this is a pretty complex document, and I thought it would be wise to have a discussion about this prior to bringing this to you for a vote. We have not had the opportunity to have this at a work session, and I'll attempt to be brief. But there are some things that we need to consider as we move forward as it relates to our building permits, licenses, applications to the Planning Commission, all of those matters that relate to our growth and development. You may recall we've had some conversations regarding building permit revenue, how it was used in the past, facilities fund, how those dollars were assigned in the past. Our auditors last year encouraged us, and we did so, remove the ordinance that identified specifically the facilities fund as a standalone fund. The facilities fund is now a checking account that operates under the general fund, and we do budget the facilities fund or the facilities account on its own as we do any other fund, although it functions within the general fund. I know it's a little confusing, but that's the best accounting explanation I can give you. Within that, we know that we need to revise our fee structure for building permits and planning documents, simply because we're a little behind the times on those fee structures. We also have looked at revising how we handle engineering fees as they are charged to the developer, so much so that in the past what has happened is a developer brings a project to the city submits a review of that project to the city's engineer. The city's engineer bills the city for the review of that matter. The city then bills the developer for reimbursement of the review of that matter. In effect, we've become a bank rather than an agency that reviews planning documents. And we're working to remove ourselves from that. So I'd like to give you some information just briefly to go over, let you know what the new document will look like. And we'll set a date by email for a work session to kind of go over this exhaustively to make sure everyone understands how this will function. The first item I have for you is a 2-page document stapled that simply outlines the residential and commercial permitting that we've had over the last 4 years. This is done on the calendar year. This is not done on the fiscal year. So if we look at calendar year 2016, it looks like we had 75, I wish we had 75,000 sometime, 75 single-family residential building permits issued, 2 multifamily residential building permits issued, 2 commercial building permits for a total of 79. Obviously, the majority of those were single-family residential, is where we're trying to get to with this information, but so you'll know where we are. 2017, we had 133 single-family residential building permits, 9 multifamily, 2 commercial, for a total of 144. Again, the great majority are residential building permits. The next page, calendar year 2018, we had 74 single-family residential building permits, 2 commercial building permits for a total of 76. So far this year, we've had 36 single-family, 4 multifamily, and 1 commercial for a total of 41. Obviously, that will increase as the year goes on. The purpose of this information is to let you know that most of our building permits are single-family residential. We like the trend, we understand that, but this information is helpful as we get into what I'll ask you to consider in ordinance form as we move forward. Let me also preface this by saying that our goal is to establish one standardized form where we would have one ordinance that identifies all of our fees and costs as it relates to development. In order to do that, we're going to have to rescind 5 different ordinances. Historically, what's happened is an ordinance was passed, something didn't work, another ordinance was passed, but the first ordinance wasn't repealed. So in effect, over a period of years, we have competing ordinances that establish fees, and we're going to have to repeal those ordinances and establish one ordinance as we move forward. It's just a part of the cleanup process as we've gotten. The final ordinance that you will have come before you will look in large part for a fee structure that is the two-page document you have that simply outlines the proposed new fee structure. When I say the proposed new fee structure, this will take some revision before its final reading and final version. But a document very similar to this, with numbers very similar to this, is what we're looking to present to you. So you'll have a clear understanding of what development cost in the city of Fairview. I think that's important for us. I won't go through each and every one of these, but the overriding goal is to make the permitting process as easily understandable as it can be for anyone who would be involved. City staff, the large developer, or the single-family homeowner who just wants to build a house. We're going to have to clean this up. A good portion of what we do currently is based on valuation. In other words, a large part, I would encourage you just to take this home and look at it, the colored document. We don't have to go over it tonight, but you'll notice in that document, a large part of our fee structure is based on valuation, which is very difficult to determine. It's hard for the city to determine, or even the developer or builder to determine a cash valuation for the end product of what they're going to build. That's very difficult for them to provide. It's very difficult for us to govern. How are we sure? The easiest way to do this, which is a relative standard, is by square foot. Ultimately, we're going to inspect items by square foot. That's how we walk it. That's how we inspect it. That's what we look at. So using a square foot measure for the valuation of our permits makes the most sense. So as you look down this document, what we will do is mirror very closely everything you see on page 1, where page 1 simply states a single-family residential. Within single-family residential, the cost for single-family residential building permit would be $1.50 per square foot. Very simple. Half of that will go to the facilities account, half of that will go to the general fund. So now we have a defined value that would go forward with that. Commercial, multifamily, we would assign that a value of $500 to be allocated to the facilities fund, which is the current allocation to the facilities fund. And then a graduating scale going down for the cost per square foot of commercial property. And you can see here where under 1,000 feet will be $3 per square foot, 1,001 square feet to 5,000 square feet will be $2 a square foot, and then anything over 5,000 square feet would be $1.50 a square foot. If you take just these two sections alone and mirror those to what we have by the valuation, I've done a calculation that took me about a day to do, but the calculation for what currently exists to the proposed is an increase of about 25% on average. You may recall that when we passed the budget this year, we discussed increasing those revenues by 25% under a new calculation. So as we've gone forward, we've not done a gross increase in fees. We've simply increased our fees pursuant to our cost and changed the calculation of it. So when I get information out to you and we do our best effort to figure out what the current cost would be and what the proposed cost would be, just know we're converting dollar valuation to square foot cost. And I'll try to make that an easier, understandable document once you see it. What we want to do is be fair, equitable to the city and equitable to the person who's paying for the application. Below that, there's some minimum fees, the plumbing, mechanical fees. These are standard numbers across our region. How we got most of this were we looked at two cities that had the easiest to understand fee structure, the city of Franklin and the city of Spring Hill. Basically, we did a hybrid of those two combined with some information that we already have, and that's how we arrived at these numbers. So we have plumbing and mechanical fee. We have accessory structures, decks, that would not be included with an original building permit. Plans, plats, annexation, and rezoning submission fees. There's an asterisk beside that we'll get to in just a moment. Below that, miscellaneous project fees. Someone wants to come in and have a lot line moved or property division or something like that that may not go to the planning commission but does take time for review. We have those fees that are in there. Below that, we have a mobile food pantry or a food truck permit at $50 per year, so we can register those and know where those are. The last line on page 1 will be likely the most legalistic in its final form, but a residential rental or lease property permit will be $25 per unit. That'd be a house, apartment, et cetera, per year. We want to know if a property is a single family, if it's homeowner occupied, or if it's a rental or lease property. There are a variety of reasons why we need to know that. So we assign that at $25 per unit per year. It's not to be punitive, but it is a fee that we can assess, so we can maintain a record of what those structures are. Again, there are a variety of reasons why we need to know that information, but permitting those each year is a valid effort on the city's part. The second page that you have before you relates to our cost for engineering review. We get various documents that come before the city. They're an engineering review, they're a subdivision plat, all these things where historically we've been banking, where we submit it to the engineer bills us, and then we rebill the developer back. Again, the purpose of this is to try and get us out of the banking business and into the review business, as we should. So what we've done is go back and assign an engineering fee structure so that when developer X comes in and they provide their documentation, they submit their plans for review, this is the cost structure that's going to apply to those reviews. The city would then simply pay our engineers straight out of our operating budget rather than trying to manage cash flow to and from our engineers. Just doesn't make sense under the structure we have. The third paragraph, or the first paragraph with an asterisk at the beginning of the paragraph, is an important one. What we've run into in the past is multiple reviews for projects that come before the city. Those multiple reviews take time, they take money. What this does is allow the city to assess a resubmission fee for the project and for the engineering cost upon the third review. In other words, developer comes in, they submit their engineering fee, they submit their their fee for whatever we're reviewing, that's fine. We will then review that for the first time, as we should, get that back out to them. We'll review it, we'll send it back with our notes, they'll submit it back a second time, which is common. At that point, it should be correct. We've gotten it, we've reviewed it, it should have been correct on the first time, they rarely are. We've gotten it, we've reviewed it, we've sent it back to them, made our notes, they've submitted it back for a second time. At that point, it's either correct and we move forward, or it's incorrect and we send it back out to them. For the third and every subsequent review, the fee would be 1/2 of the original fee submitted. In other words, we've assessed a $1,000 fee to review these documents. We've taken it in, we've reviewed it, we sent it out. They made corrections, they sent it back. It's still not right, we send it out a third time. Once it comes back to us the third time, they owe us 1/2 of the original fee if they wish to proceed with the review. That's not to be punitive, that's to move the process along and make sure that everybody's doing what they're supposed to do. Now, obviously, if within this we notice that there's an error on the city's part, where we've reviewed this thing, we sent it back, we reviewed it again, and there's something that the city has not gotten right, we are not going to charge them for the third review based on a city error. That is not fair to do. But as we go forward, those fees need to be recouped somehow, some way. And that's the best way I know to do that and make sure we're getting quality submissions on the outset. Lastly, fire department fees. Right now, we don't have an enforceable process for a violation of the city's burn ordinance. If there's a violation of the city's burn ordinance, the fire department can go out and notify them that there's a violation of the city's burn ordinance, but there is no statute or code within the city's municipal code currently that assigns a fee for that or fine for that. So we can go notice them that they're in violation of the city's burn ordinance, but there's no penalty for violation of the city's burn ordinance. There's also a limitation by the state that limits how much the city can assign a fine for a violation of some sort. So what you have before you is this, and this will be a separate ordinance. Single-family residential burn permit will be 0. We just want them to get a permit for what they're burning, and the fire department needs to know if that action is taking place. There'll be no fee for that. We just want it to be permitted so we understand what's happening in those areas. The violation for not obtaining a burn permit for a single-family residential will be $50 per day. So if they've come in and have not gotten a permit, we've gone out, we see the violation, we can issue them a fine for $50. If they burn the next day, another fine for $50 as it goes forward. That is within the code to allow us for that. Commercial and multifamily residential building permits, the permits would be $50 per day, $250 per week, $500 per month. Yes, there are some commercial sites and larger development sites that burn for longer than a day or burn for longer than a week. If you're clearing a good bit of property, you have stumps, debris, other things, it's not uncommon for those to burn weeks at a time. As long as they are managed, it's not a problem. Unmanaged is a problem, but we do need to permit that process. Failure to do that will be the same, $50 per day after the second inspection. We will go out and make sure that those are being done, but commercial sites can be problematic. And again, the double asterisk at the bottom, fine amounts may be limited or restricted by the TCA. So my request for you tonight, again, this is not in the form to take any action. It is in the form to let you know this is a comprehensive task to change all of these documents in this fee structure. If you would take these with you, review them, make sure that you maintain them. Once we get the documents in ordinance form, we'll get that back out to you, make sure that it's understandable. We'll have a comparison for previous fee or permit cost compared to the new permit cost so you can see where we are. We will have this for a first reading at the next meeting on the 15th, and then have a second reading the first meeting in September with a work session likely dedicated solely to this at the first meeting in September, BOC meeting work session. So within that, I'll be glad to answer any question. I've talked a lot. There's a lot of work that's gone into this, but this is a comprehensive document that just has to be done.
Collins?
Yes, sir.
Just to clarify, when we say there's a single-family residential burn permit, is that if they have an outdoor fireplace?
No, sir.
Okay.
No, sir. This does not include someone has a fire pit in their backyard that they would have for a small.
This is burning a brush pile or something like that?
That's right. This is not to restrict anyone's ability to have a family-oriented fire pit on their property.
Okay. That's what I assumed, but you know what happens when you assume.
Yes, sir. And that will be worded in the ordinance as well.
Thank you.
Anything else? Thank you, Mr. Collins. Item 11B, Resolution 24-19. Vice Mayor Rainey.
Resolution 24-19, a resolution of the City of Fairview, Tennessee, designating a vehicle or vehicles and/or equipment as surplus, authorizing the disposal of said vehicle or vehicles and/or equipment.
Move to approve.
Second.
First and a second. Any discussion? Hearing none, roll call vote. Mr. Collins?
Mr. Burks? Commissioner Rainey, or Vice Mayor Rainey?
Aye.
Commissioner Dawson?
Aye.
Commissioner Lucas?
Aye.
Vice Mayor Blade?
Aye.
Motion carries. Thank you.
Item 12, Communication from Mayors and Commissioners. Commissioner Burks.
I have nothing tonight, Your Mayor.
Thank you, sir. Commissioner Dawson.
Just a quick prayer for all of the kids going back to school in Williamson County. I'm sure they're all extremely excited. I know my two kids are. That's all I have, Mayor.
Thank you, sir. Commissioner Lucas.
Nothing tonight, Mayor. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Vice Mayor Rainey.
Nothing tonight, Mayor, thank you.
Thank you, ma'am, and nothing from me. At 7:40, we will adjourn to executive session.
Yes, sir, and at the conclusion of the executive session, the BOC will come back and adjourn its regular meeting. There will not be any action to take place. Also, the executive session will take place in this room.
Okay.
So we will, as soon as we finish this discussion, we will ask anyone who's not a member of the Planning Commission, BOC, or city attorney legal staff to step outside of the council chambers.
Okay.
Are the speakers off in the lobby?